With big-time trade and injury news across Major League Baseball Thursday, did we gain some interesting intel on where the Cardinals might stand and where they could be going from here? What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here with you in the evening hours of Thursday, July 25th, 2024. Cardinals off day today, but not an off day for B-Schaeff Daily because we've actually got a lot of interesting MLB news to get to on the pod tonight. And you can trace a good amount of it back to the Cardinals, even though they're not involved in any of it specifically. We'll always try to sprinkle in the Cardinals nuggets where we can as it pertains to some of the news going on with other clubs. Tonight we'll be talking about the Christian Yelich injury news, the Mason Miller injury news, which is a very bizarre situation going on for the Oakland Athletics, as well as touching on an actual trade that took place as a marquee relief pitcher was dealt in the National League tonight. AJ Puk going from the Marlins to the Dbacks. I want to give my perspective on that deal. Some people were surprised at maybe how much the Diamondbacks had to pay to get AJ Puk, and I'll give you my perspective on what I think of the deal, as well as potentially a deal that this is a guy that I thought would have been traded for sure, but that was before the news that dropped earlier today about Garrett Crochet and what his demands might be for any team that trades for him, planning on using him in October. Very interesting stuff that I think Cardinals fans will be interested to hear about. And oh yeah, Dylan Cease, a guy that the Cardinals arguably should have traded for in the offseason, threw a no-hitter today, despite Mike Shildt's best efforts. So I'll explain what I mean by that. But those are the topics right off the top, so we're going to waste no time in getting into each and every one of them, other than to let you know to subscribe to this YouTube channel if you enjoy daily baseball and especially St. Louis Cardinals content throughout the season and the offseason, a daily podcast for your listening pleasure. And if you're interested in joining the Discord, that's free, and a lot of Cardinals fans have congregated there. The link is in the description to this video, as is the link to join the YouTube channel membership. The B-Schaeff Daily Lounge tier of the YouTube membership allows you to join a private group chat on Discord. You just have to shoot me a DM after you upgrade to the Lounge tier so that I can get you in to the chat. And I like talking about what's coming up on B-Schaeff Daily with the people in the lounge. I threw it out there tonight, and I said, guys, am I missing anything? And one of my guys, Damien, said, well, what about that Christian Yelich news? I said, good point. That's going to lead the show tonight because I think it is the piece of news from MLB Thursday that is most closely related to the Cardinals. The Cardinals are trailing the Milwaukee Brewers in the NL Central Division, but not by an amount that I think is insurmountable down the stretch. But the Brewers have really showed no signs of faltering recently. We just kind of expected, I guess, because coming into the year, at least I didn't think the Brewers were going to be as good as they've been. It wasn't just because of the Corbin Burnes trade, but that was a big part of it. But I remember acknowledging that, look, I think trading Corbin Burnes was a timing issue for Milwaukee. They knew they weren't going to be able to sign him. So in a vacuum, that was a move that they felt makes sense, right? They're going to try to get some pieces back for him rather than lose him for nothing in a year where maybe they weren't ready to go all in. Now, I guess with Corbin Burnes, you'd feel a little bit better about what they could potentially do come October, but they haven't needed Corbin Burnes to carry a 6-game lead over the Cardinals and then therefore everybody else because the Cardinals are still in second place in the NL Central. It's kind of interesting that move did not signal a complete teardown for Milwaukee. They never said, look, we're not going to try to win games. They just sort of played it down the road, kicking the can down the road on adding some assets for a player that was an expiring contract. And look, they're still a good team. They have a lot of good relievers, really solid bullpen. Offensively, I'm not too impressed by the Brewers, but they've had enough. But they've been doing what they've been doing in large part thanks to a pretty good season from Christian Yelich, one of their longtime studs in the outfield, a guy that, speaking of guys who should have been traded to the Cardinals, when the Cardinals traded for Marcell Ozuna, they refused to call the bluff of the Miami Marlins when they said they weren't trading Christian Yelich. They said, okay, we'll take Ozuna. And Ozuna was, not a good player for the Cardinals, not as good as they were hoping for him to be with what they gave up to get him. And also probably not the best guy in the clubhouse. And then you have Christian Yelich ultimately traded by Miami to a division rival of the Cardinals when Yelich was the guy they wanted all along. Anyway, I hate to rehash old stuff, but that's still one that you go, man, if they had just played it a little bit differently. But they were desperate to get a good outfielder, and Ozuna had great numbers. And at the time, it didn't seem like the disaster of a deal that it kind of ultimately has played out to be when you think about Alcantara and Zach Gallen in the fact that Ozuna played 2 years here, was kind of mid, and then has honestly been better since he left. So that's just kind of the story of that whole thing. But Christian Yelich has had almost a resurgent season compared to some of his recent numbers. Remember, he had the MVP year. Next year, he finished second in the MVP in 2019. Was an absolute stud, one of the best hitters in baseball for 2 years in a row. And then really came back down to earth in the season since then. 2020, 2021, 2022 had OPSs in the mid-700s, basically. Was okay in those years, but it was a pretty stark drop-off from where he had been. And then last year, he started to pick it back up a little bit. Still not very old in 2023 at 31 years old. 818, the OPS last year. This year, leading the league in batting average right now at 315. Was an all-star this season with a 909 OPS. He's slugging over 500. Has just been an absolute force in that lineup. Cut down on strikeouts. Home runs is not really the thing carrying his game too much. Only 11 this year. Hit 19 last year. Those are fine numbers, but I mean, he hits for average. He hits some doubles. He gets on base at a ridiculous clip. A 406 on base. 40 walks and 58 strikeouts this year. Christian Yelich has made up for a lot of what I consider otherwise to be a pretty pedestrian Milwaukee offense this season. He's been unbelievable for them. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, who are you to call the Brewers pedestrian offensively when they're tied for 10th in MLB right now in OPS in the low 700s as a team? And that's fair, but when you look outside of Yelich, who's got a 910 OPS, let me just run it down the list for you. William Contreras has been really good, 787, but he's second best on that team. Adames, 770. Joey Ortiz, 766. Rhys Hoskins, 714. Jake Bauer, 713. Bryce Terang, 709. Jackson Chourio, 704. So, like, that's their top 9. Well, that's their top 8. And then number 9, I guess, of the more full-time players, Gary Sanchez, 690. Blake Perkins down there at 688. Offense is down around baseball. So it's interesting that we could look at this lineup and go, well, who's hurting you other than Christian Yelich and maybe William Contreras? The answer is really maybe not a lot of anybody that stands out, but they're more consistent 1 through 9 than the Cardinals. I'll hand them that because the Cardinals have some gaping holes in their lineups at times throughout the year, and injuries has been a part of that. Underperformance by stars has been a part of that. But, you know, they've got a team of guys hitting with a 700 or better OPS. Chourio is 8th on the team of their regulars in OPS, and he's at 704. Right? The Cardinals, if you go 1 through 9, you're going to find guys like Goldschmidt, guys like Arenado below that mark this season. Gorman's right around the same as Chourio. And those were supposed to be kind of the Cardinals' best hitters. So my thought on the Brewer offense coming into the year was they don't really have many stars. And I didn't really think that the remainder of that group, kind of the bottom half of their lineup, would be as good as it's been. And it's not that it's been outstanding. It's just been solid, which in Major League Baseball 2024 is an accomplishment when there are teams like the Cardinals and others that have some holes at the bottom of their order. The Brewers, pretty tough 1 through 9 just because they've got a lot of guys doing similar things and not any major gaping holes in that lineup. So I credit where it's due, man. They've been a lot better than I thought they would be. But without Yelich, is that going to be the same? Without that force at the top of the lineup really setting the tone. He's also got 21 stolen bases this year, by the way. I mean, he has been fantastic. And Christian Yelich, news comes out within the last couple of days that he's going on the injured list, dealing with a back issue, right? But then it seemed as though it was almost becoming a foregone conclusion that Yelich was maybe going to see the end of his season, have season-ending surgery to address the lower back inflammation that landed him on the injured list. And that's not currently the case as we record. The latest I'm seeing from earlier this evening, Associated Press titled the article, Brewers Yelich still hoping to avoid back surgery this season, which would be great news for the Brewers if that can be the case and he can make it back, because this is a team that's primed for October. Like, they're going to make the playoffs the way things are going. And if they can get him back for that stretch run, even if they don't have him for, say, all of August, it's a lot better than season-ending back surgery for a team that's in first place in their division and honestly has a shot to clear the Dodgers out west and get that second division winner title, which is a big deal because you would then not have to play a wild card series. I'll have to check exactly where those teams stand as of right now. I haven't been checking up on the Dodgers lately, but I know that the Brewers were in kind of a close proximity to the Dodgers as of a few days ago. Milwaukee's at 59-43. Brewers have that pretty good stranglehold on the Cardinals there in the Central. Dodgers 62-42. A differential of just about a game and a half between the Dodgers and the Brewers. So that's certainly not a number that's insurmountable at this point. Couple games. I think it's 2 games. My math was off. Brewers are behind 3 in the win column, 1 in the loss column. But if they lose Christian Yelich and they don't get him back for the playoffs, I do think that changes the nature of this lineup. Does it change the nature of the division being attainable for the Cardinals? I think would be everybody's obvious question. I saw a lot of sentiment out there. Hey, if Yelich is out, are the Brewers gettable? Hey, Cardinals, go make a move. Like, it's there for the taking. I'm not entirely sure. If we knew for sure that Yelich was going to have surgery and be out instead of trying to rehab his way back from this, maybe that, and I don't know that it changes the way the Cardinals look at it. Like, John Mozeliak probably doesn't go, hey, we got to be more aggressive. The Brewers lost Yelich. I mean, he's a difference-making player. I don't know that there are too many players in baseball, though, where your division rival loses their top star, and then you say that's going to tangibly impact what we do. I don't know that many teams are run like that, but I understand from a fan perspective how you'd look at it and say, now, wait a minute. What are the Brewers if they don't have Christian Yelich? Not a ton of guys in MLB are going to accumulate 6 wins above replacement, and the Cardinals are currently 6 back of them before this Yelich injury. So to think that over the final 2-month push, the Cardinals could gain 6 wins over a third of a season just because of one guy being out is probably presumptuous. But if it makes it a closer gap, and we thought maybe the talent gap wasn't 6 games to begin with, and maybe you don't think that out there in Cardinals land. I've seen a lot of sentiment of people saying in my comments here on YouTube, the Cardinals should just sell. This team's not going anywhere. I am not of that belief, even if I had skepticism that the Cardinals are going anywhere, which I still think as of now, I see them making a wild card. But I'm not as confident as I was a couple weeks ago. That's more, though, about what other teams are doing. And we'll talk about the Dbacks basically going from a team where we're looking at their players going, they're going to sell Jordan Montgomery. They're going to trade away Randall Grichuk to they bought today, very aggressively bought. So they're in the mix. There are more teams in the mix than I thought maybe a week and a half ago there was going to be at this point. It seemed like some teams were fading out, and instead the teams that we thought might be fading out haven't done so, and teams like the Dbacks have wedged their way back in. All we've really gotten is the Cubs' Jed Hoyer saying, barring something crazy over the next week, we're going to look at it from a selling perspective. We're going to look at it from a build for the future perspective. And the Cubs aren't even all that far back, and the Reds aren't even all that far back, but I think the Reds are also in that mode. Other than that, though, those teams in the middle of the NL table are basically all, I think, still kind of in it to win it. You're not going to necessarily see a lot of those teams turn into sellers. But even that being said, I still would peg the Cardinals as a wild card team if I were put on the spot about that, because I do think that they have talent, and I think that they are going to make a couple moves, maybe not major ones, but a move or two ahead of the deadline to reinforce their position, and I think they do need that. But even if I didn't believe the Cardinals were positioned to make it, I almost think the front office still owes the fan base the push at the deadline out of good faith to try and make it happen, even if it doesn't seem like statistically it's as likely as it was, because I think you're vying against a handful of other teams instead of maybe just 1 or 2 teams vying for that last spot. You've got at least a handful that are maybe jostling for a position or 2 in the wild card mix. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I've just been consistent about this going all the way back to spring, that I think the Cardinals front office kind of owes it to the fans. I think it's incumbent upon them to make a push, to do everything within their power to improve the team at this deadline and see where the chips fall at the end of 162. And if that leaves you short, then you maybe reevaluate. But that's kind of the strategy that they, in my opinion, owe to Cardinals fans. But for those people out there who say, nope, this team isn't as talented as you think it is, they're not going to catch the Brewers, and they're also not going to do any damage in the postseason, even if they sneak in as a wild card. For those people, then you would probably say, no, the talent gap between the Brewers and the Cardinals is not as slim as you're making it out to be, which is fine if that's your opinion. But I wonder what the Yelich news does. Because there are still some big head-to-heads coming between the Cardinals and Brewers as well. And maybe not having to face a Christian Yelich could end up being a difference in a couple of those games. When you're facing a team head to head, you don't have to worry about their de facto best hitter in the lineup. If in fact it goes that way, that they don't have to, then that ends up making a pretty big difference. Checking out the Cardinals' schedule, I want to get a grip on exactly when these Milwaukee games are, and I should know off the top of my head, but I never do. I never end up looking too far ahead with this scheduling stuff. But looking at it now, August 20th through 22nd, the Cardinals host a 3-gamer against Milwaukee. And then they're at Milwaukee to begin September, basically, September 2nd through the 4th. So you've got those 6 big games looming. Let's read a little bit about this Yelich thing and see where we can maybe speculate if the reporting is out there on, okay, you're going to rehab it. What's that going to look like? This is from Yelich. Quote, I've dealt with back stuff for a while and have been able to kind of manage it and get through it and find a way to be out there. We're going to come up with a great plan. We've got some steps to try to rehab this thing along the way and really get back out there as soon as possible. Who knows when that's going to be, how quick that can be. I'm hoping as quick as possible. And he did miss about a month earlier this season with the lower back strain and then was lifted for a pinch hitter in the 8th inning on Tuesday, and that's the next day. Wednesday is when he went on the IL. But today is when we started to hear more of that sort of rumbling about this could be maybe a surgical thing, which if that's the case, he would be done for the season. So, I mean, a month is probably not an unreasonable guess if he's going to rehab and try to come back, if it's similar to the lower back strain that he had earlier in the season. But when you have that, you come back from it, you still perform well, but you're managing the symptoms and just trying to be out there every day. That's a lot of physical therapy, probably. That's a lot of various modalities to try to get it, just try to be out there. And, you know, Christian Yelich is far from the only guy in Major League Baseball doing that on a day-to-day basis throughout every summer. But the ability to perform at a high level, as long as he's able to play and play through the pain, because they've called it, you know, back inflammation, tightness, strain, but it's probably pain that is really the hindrance in a lot of this, because he's been able to perform when he's out there. And that doesn't mean he's 100% when he's been out there. But if this is not the surgical option, which it seems like they're going to rehab, so he's at least going to give it a go to not have a surgery. And then when is it a month? Because that probably means you're playing the Cardinals in St. Louis the 20th and 22nd. Pardon me, the 20th through 22nd of August. So that probably means I would put him out for that series, but not a guarantee. It could be right around that time that he's looking to come back. It wouldn't shock me if he came back on August 20th, just because that's when they're gonna be facing the Cardinals. But if it ends up being longer than that, he'd miss that series, and then it's not too much longer after that he would end up missing the early September series against the Cardinals. But Cardinals fans, let me know, how much does the Yelich injury, if it ends up being a month plus type of deal or even a season-ending one, does that change your opinion on the aggressiveness the Cardinals should have at the deadline? Myself, personally, I'll answer my own rhetorical question. To me, it doesn't change it that much. Because I think where I sit, they should already have aggression. The Cardinals should be aggressive at the deadline. What they should be pursuing is maybe going to be dependent upon what's out there and available. But to me, it's multiple relievers. If not multiple, you got to have at least one really good one that you add. And it was pointed out to me like, well, Riley O'Brien is kind of working his way back. So maybe that's a guy that you get back and he ends up being as good of a contributor as you had hoped. And if that's the case, then maybe you only need one additional reliever. All right, I'll leave room for that to be possible. My thought would be get a righty and a lefty would be highly beneficial to this bullpen. Just because there's no guarantee that after July 30, like, injuries don't cease to exist. You can still get hurt playing baseball. You can still get hurt pitching a baseball after the trade deadline. What you can't do as a team is figure out a way to accommodate for those injuries and make up for them by adding players. The deadline is when that's going to stop. So I would get out in front of it and be looking to stock up. And then it's just a war of attrition to the end. If you have more relievers than you need, that's an okay problem. I'll tell which guy needs to go to Memphis or which guy ends up getting cut, whatever. Like, those things are good problems to have. It's just hard conversations that would need to be had. But I think there's going to be some of those anyway, no matter if you're trading for one guy or multiple guys. Like, there's going to be guys that are going to end up displaced as a result of that, and that's always difficult. but I think there are the margins of this roster for the Cardinals that can be improved upon. But Yelich in that situation doesn't change a lot for me because I don't think in my heart of hearts at this point that the Cardinals are going to be primed to catch the Dodgers. And you might be saying, Brenden, why are you talking about the Dodgers? That's a totally different division. It is, but remember, top 2 division winners get to bypass the wild card series, and that's what matters. MLB, the way they have structured the playoff format, has changed what matters. The division doesn't matter. It's not different than winning the first wild card at all, other than the matchup of who you would face in the first round. You're playing a best 2 out of 3. You're playing it at home. That's true of the third best division winner in the NL and of the best wild card team in the NL. It's true of both of those teams. So if you don't think you can catch the Dodgers, which I don't at this point, there was a time where I thought maybe it was possible. Now I don't really consider it as plausible because I just haven't seen enough consistency, honestly, from the offense. You kept kind of thinking, surely eventually Arenado and Goldschmidt are going to get the OPSs not only above 700, but pushing 750. And it's July 25th, and we have not seen that happen yet. So maybe it isn't going to happen, and you have to think about this team and this lineup and the way they're built a little bit differently. But if I don't think they can catch the Dodgers, or are very likely to do so, then I'm not going to go crazy changing my strategy because of something that happened to the Brewers. The division doesn't matter because of the format. And that sounds maybe hyperbolic because, of course, they're going to pop champagne if they win the division. But it functionally doesn't matter. You can win the division and still be just in the same spot as those other wildcard teams. And honestly, it might even be better for the team to play it on the road. Wouldn't be better for ownership. They'd like to have the ticket sales and the concessions and the parking and everything like that. But sometimes, man, I don't know. It worked for the Phillies in 22. Sometimes you can band together on the road in those magical couple of days and find a way to spark something. And for whatever reason, I almost think it would be better for the Cardinals to do that. Tell me if I'm crazy. But like we've seen those before. But nevertheless, no, I don't think the Cardinals should change their strategy dramatically because of the Yelich situation, especially because he's not even having the surgery. He's going to try to rehab it. But I think they should be aggressive as it is. I think that's already hopefully a prerequisite, regardless of what's going on around them. Mason Miller will not be traded, I don't think, at the deadline after he broke the 5th metacarpal, the pinky finger, in his non-throwing hand. How he broke the finger was some matter of discussion and debate on Thursday when this news came out. Initially, Martin Gallegos, who is a beat writer, covers the A's for MLB.com. I don't know what his original tweet said because he deleted it and quote tweeted himself and said, hey, a clarification. At first, it was said that he punched a table basically out of frustration. And that's weird because on Monday night, the Athletics beat the Astros 4-0. And Miller had an 11-pitch, 1-2-3 9th inning to close out the win. So what's this guy frustrated about that he's punching something in the clubhouse? Initially, there was some confusion about that. According to this story from MLB.com, and I'm just going to read it to you. I'm going to read you what was said by Mark Kotsay, the A's manager, who clarified the specifics of what happened. And you tell me if you believe it, honestly. Because my first thought was, when I saw that it was reported that he was frustrated and then that it had to be clarified, my first thought reading those series of tweets was, we're never going to know what happened. This is a story, and we're never really going to get to the bottom of it. But this seems maybe plausible, but let me know what you think. This quote comes from A's manager Mark Kotsay. Quote, the truth is, post-game Monday night, after being done with his pitching, Mason came in the training room and was going through his recovery. Normal so far. He was reminded that he had a post-game lift to get in, like weightlifting. Out of a little frustration, he just kind of pounded his fist down on the padded training table out of emotion. Unfortunately, he's not able to squeeze his glove and got himself put on the IL. Kotsay added that Miller is in a cast, should be reevaluated in a few weeks. Miller cannot wear a glove and squeeze the glove due to injury. However, he can continue throwing and will throw some side sessions in San Francisco on Tuesday. I was wondering, with it being the non-throwing hand, if he would even need a very lengthy IL stint. But if he's wearing a cast, I guess that'll do it. I'm a little surprised they don't just kind of splint it up. But I guess if you take a comebacker that you have to field and it makes some hard contact with that part of the glove and the pinky, that would hurt like hell and probably cause additional damage. So He's on the Athletics. Like, we got to remind ourselves. I was like, they couldn't, like, splint it and just shove the hand in there and say, don't field? Like, how many... And again, the ball gets thrown back to him every single time he pitches. I get that. But otherwise, it's like, I don't know. But this is the Athletics we're talking about. They're going to lose 100 games. That if he's on an MLB contender at this point, I wonder if they would be like, dude, just wrap it up with some tape or something. It's not even your pitching hand. You don't let balls in play anyway. You strike out everybody you face. What does it matter? By the way, the A's might not lose 100 games. They're 41-63. So they're on a close pace, I think. 394 is their winning percentage. I'll do a little quick math here. Oh, no. They're on pace to win, no, they're not. Hold on. I typed that in wrong. They're on pace to win 63.82 games. So they're going to be right on that borderline of 100. I just kind of assumed. They've actually been playing a little better than you might think. They got some decent hitters. Obviously, Brent Rooker. If you trade him, you probably lose more games. Mason Miller's not closing games right now, so you probably lose games that you wouldn't have otherwise lost with him. But anyway, they're not a contending team, so there's no reason for Mason Miller to try to be a hero. And what I'm saying might not even be possible anyway. I'm not a doctor. What do I know? I'm full of crap. But anyway, Mason Miller getting hurt in the weirdest imaginable way. And again, let me know if you buy it. Is that the story? You won the game. Why would you be frustrated? He pounded the table because he was told he had to go lift weights, or he was reminded that he had to go lift weights, and so he kind of, did one of those. See, I just broke my pinky doing that. No, I didn't. But that's crazy. And that's a tough learning moment for a young player, too. All the talent in the world, and to do something stupid like that costs you time on the mound. I mean, it's not for a contending team, so it's not like it's the end of the world, but this is the guy's career and livelihood. I don't think he wants to be out there pitching. And that's just one of those learning moments, I think, if that's really the way that it went down. And it's believable enough to me. It's plausible enough to me. Like I said, I thought we would never know the full story until then I read this story that came out about 7 p.m. tonight, is that he was reminded that he had to lift post-game, and he pounds his fist down on a padded training table. How hard do you have to pound your fist down on a padded table? I'm doing it on a desk right now. I guess I'm not trying to hit the bone first. You don't throw a punch with your thumb wrapped in your hand. You know that, right? He must have just caught the bone in a weird way and shattered it. I don't know, dude. That's crazy to me. But it sucks for the Athletics. It sucks for Mason Miller. And it sucks for potentially any contender that was hoping to trade for him. The crazy pie-in-the-sky trade concept that we put together the other night, involving Gorman, Walker, Graceffo, and whoever the Cardinals' top pitching prospect is, for Rooker and Mason Miller. Well, that's out the window, as if it was ever in the window. It was never going to happen anyway, but I don't know, man. It would have been interesting to see, because the rumors of, they're going to pretty much guard Mason Miller pretty closely. They're going to need multiple top 100 prospects to move him. It's that doesn't seem like a very big price, honestly, for a guy that's a rookie, so he's cost controlled for a bunch of time. What do I need to do with a top 100 prospect when I have a guy who is pitching like the best reliever in baseball, if not one of the couple best relievers in baseball? What do I care about a top 100 prospect? I'll give you 3. This guy is elite. And there's no rule that says he can't maybe go back to being a starter at some point, too. He might be Skeens level as a starter. You don't know. I'm not saying he is. But it's weird to me that a couple top 100 prospects. Okay, do it. You pick them. To me, I do not agree with folks that say, and look, there are smart people that feel this way, but that say, oh, he's just a reliever, so I'm not going to trade a haul for him because he's only a relief pitcher. Normally, that is my stance, but there are exceptions to every rule, and I think Mason Miller is the exception to the rule that says relievers are inherently less valuable than starters for a couple of reasons. One, he's got 5 more years of team control because he's a rookie. That almost never happens with guys that we're talking about being traded, but it's happening with this guy because the A's stink, and they're going to stink for a while because they don't care until they move to Vegas. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is, I don't think there's a rule that says he can't go be a starter. I remember, I guess I don't have him on this fantasy team anymore. I feel like I did, though. I picked him up. Maybe I traded him in the offseason. But I was holding him as thinking he was going to be a stud. And then I was like, oh, he's going to be a reliever. That kind of sucks. But that was the thing that got him to the big league level the fastest. And it's obviously working out for him. But anyway, weird injury and no trade for you, Mason Miller. I don't think he would have been traded anyway unless somebody was going to just blow them away with a great offer. A guy that has been traded, though, is a guy who did his spring training down in Jupiter, Florida. AJ Puk of the Marlins is no longer AJ Puk of the Marlins. He's a D-back. After being traded this evening in exchange for a pair of top 30 prospects, that's within the D-backs organization, not top 30 in baseball. Arizona's number 14 overall prospect per MLB Pipeline, Davison de los Santos, and I'm pronouncing the first name the way that I am seeing it on Baseball Reference. Davison de los Santos, a corner infielder who has been performing really well in the higher levels of the minors this season. Had an 11.22 OPS in Double-A for about half the year, and then at Triple-A Reno has a 9.26 OPS. This guy could be just about ready to roll. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to see the Marlins call him up at some point this year. And according to Pipeline, he's their number 5 prospect, right behind Max Meyer. So he's moving up in the world. And then Andrew Pintar, Pintar, outfielder, not really performing as well, was I think their number 30 prospect for Arizona. I don't know that he cracks the top 30. I assume he will crack the top 30 for the Marlins. Yeah, he's in there at number 19, according to Pipeline in that update. And that's always kind of a rough estimate. Trade deadline, it gets to be a little silly, and off-season, those will update, of course. But Pintar had some good numbers at the lower levels of the minors this year, and then has come up to Double-A and is kind of struggling. But had a 919 OPS in High A, 10 games at Double-A. Right now he's hitting 184. But 23 years old, so probably needed to jump up to a higher level and see how he could perform at Double-A at 23. But that's the haul, right? It's De Los Santos, who's got a 926 OPS in Triple-A, 210 plate appearances, only 21. That's a nice piece. That's a legitimately nice piece. And the reason I talk about it in this episode is because I'm wondering what that does to gauge your view, Cardinals fans, of the relief market. Because AJ Puk, if you remember back to April, was down for the count when the Marlins tried to use him as a starter to begin the season. Listen to these game logs from AJ Puk as a starter. 2 innings, 4 earned. 4 innings, 4 runs, 2 earned. 4 2/3, 2 runs, 1 earned. That was a decent start, but still couldn't get through 5. 3 innings, 7 earned. And then the experiment was no more. Has not started a game since. However, they moved him to the bullpen, and that's gone pretty well. Had some hiccups here and there, but has basically a 2.08 ERA as a reliever. And since June 23rd, a stretch which spans, looks like a little more than a dozen. What's he had appearance-wise? He's thrown 15 innings in 13 appearances. 22 strikeouts in those 15 innings. His ERA is 0. Has not allowed a run since back on June 19th against the Cardinals, actually. And that was an unearned run anyway. So he's been nails, allowing an opposing batting average of .063 and an opposing OPS of 180 since basically over the last month plus. He's been unbelievable. So that's an arm that you wouldn't have thought it in April, right? When he was failing as a starter, you wouldn't have thought that he was going to end up going for a borderline top 100 prospect. De Los Santos did not quite crack MLB Pipeline's top 100, but he's one spot behind in the Marlins organization a guy who did. Max Meyer is number 80 overall. De Los Santos is their number 4 prospect, according to Pipeline, and he did not crack the top 100, but he's got to be close, given that Max Meyer was 80 overall. So, I mean, that's a darn near top 100 prospect, and then another lottery ticket for a guy who had a 7 ERA or whatever it was in first month of the season as a starter. But moving him back to the bullpen, and Puk has been nasty. And he's a lefty as well. Would have loved to have seen the Cardinals get a guy like that. There is still a lefty that the Marlins have, though. I'm looking at Tanner Scott. But again, my point with this is, are you paying the price that it's going to take? Because Tanner Scott's got a 1.2 ERA. Puk's was like 4. But obviously, I think the Dbacks are making a charge right now and seeing what he's done lately and said, well, we could use that. And the fact that AJ Puk, here's the difference between AJ Puk and Tanner Scott. And maybe it'll make Scott more affordable. It's the contract. AJ Puk is still under team control for 2 more years after this one, if I'm not mistaken, 2025, 2026. Tanner Scott is a free agent after this year, which to me puts him in better range for the Cardinals. Because the Cardinals, it's okay to me that they would add a rental reliever. You can always sign him later if you like him and he likes you. But the Cardinals need to do the most they can at the least expensive in terms of assets given up to improve this team. And if you're a Cardinals fan out there that doesn't care if they improve this team, then this is going to fall on deaf ears for you. I believe that they should improve. They owe that to you guys, to the fans, in my opinion. Because they're right there on the cusp, and a couple of moves like an AJ Puk or a Tanner Scott or a Pete Fairbanks or a Carlos Estevez, names like those could potentially get them over the hump in a crowded NL wildcard picture. So what are you thinking after you saw that deal with AJ Puk going to the Diamondbacks? First of all, it means that they're not selling. They're buying aggressively. They traded a guy could be pushing for top 100 status here before too long among MLB prospects. But it's interesting, too. I think it would be remiss if you don't mention, hey, AJ Puk is also cost-controlled. He's under team control for a couple more years in ARB. So that's going to make a difference for it as well. But I think a lot of people's first reactions when they saw this trade was, uh-oh, what does that mean for the relief pitching market and what it could cost the Cardinals? Because I keep banging the drum for that should be the main thing they're going after. But if they're willing to take rentals instead of a guy that I think AJ Puk has had injury issues, has not really been able to find consistency, but the arm talent has never been in question. And at 29 years old, he's still got, some years left of team control and could be primed for a couple of great years of relief. Or maybe not, but the Diamondbacks, for them to be bold enough to say, no, we're buying. You can forget about us selling you our pieces that are short-term assets. We're buying. And I think Puk is a savvy addition, especially with the team control attached. So let me know what you think and your perspective is on what that deal specifically might mean for the relief market. A little tricky. What is Garrett Crochet's recent comments or demands? What does that mean for the starting pitching trade market? Because he basically, reportedly, said, if I'm going to pitch in October for a team that trades for me, I'm going to need an extension first. Otherwise, no thank you. No thank you, not pitching. That is a wow. Let me find the original report on this. I think it might have been a John Heyman one, which, kind of take that for whatever it is. I want to see if anybody else has put this out there. But again, what have I said about John Heyman and what to know about him is he's connected with the agents. So if John Heyman put it out there, it's probably because he got it directly from Garrett Crochet's agent, right? That's kind of, he's connected. And I'm not even saying that as like to knock John Heyman, that he's connected and he was probably given this information. Now, what would their camp have to gain by it if they were not actually feeling that way? Probably nothing. Like, I feel like this is probably a strategy for teams that are interested in trading for Crochet. His camp, his agent maybe wants it known, hey, this is the way that we want things to go. You don't really get a lot of a say into who trades for you, but if teams are looking at it going, hey, I'm not really looking to extend my innings count into October unless you're willing to extend me. Then we talk extension, then that's a whole different story. But you don't usually see this type of bold move made from a guy, not in baseball, man. You don't see this very often in baseball. I'm sure it's happened, but I can't really remember a good example of it off the top of my head. Typically, you see these sort of demands like, hey, if you trade for me, you're going to need a contract extension. That happens all the time in the NFL, right? Right now, the Jets are dealing with that with Hassan Reddick because they traded for him, but they haven't extended him. But normally, we see it with like, okay, when the Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins, it was just known, like the communication happened beforehand. They worked out that contract contingent on the deal. Like it was before the deal even happened, the trade even happened, that they were going to have a contract. Baseball, you don't really see this. But here's a tweet from Jon Heyman today. Garrett Crochet plan with the White Sox is to pitch normal workload as a starter until the end of the regular season. And the reason that would be a question mark is because this is his first year as a starter in the big leagues. And really in professional baseball at all. Because he's never been a reliever. 2023, he was down for a little bit, but I think that was basically rehabbing from his injury. He was out, I think he had Tommy John, and was out for 22 and came back in the middle of 2023. But then coming into this year, they said, we're going to make him a starter. And so the guy goes from getting drafted in 2020 as part of that COVID draft, pitching immediately for the White Sox down the stretch, 6 shutout innings of relief. Next year was a lockdown reliever for 54 and a third innings, 2.8 ERA, until he got hurt. I can't remember. I think that injury happened toward the end of 2021. Misses all of 22. 2023, 12 innings in the minors, 12 innings in the majors. And boom, he's one of the best starters in baseball this year, 111 innings with a 3.07 ERA, leading the league in strikeouts with 157. Also leading the league in FIP, fielding independent pitching at 2.30, which is crazy because his FIP was 5.7 last year. He's been really, really good. Ks per 9, leading baseball in that as well. But he says, I don't need to have an innings limit. I'm not worried about these 111 innings. In fact, what I think is going to keep me healthy and keep me stable in a good spot physically is to continue on that starter schedule with that workload for the rest of the regular season. However, I'm on a team that is certainly going to lose 100 games. And I can say that with some certainty compared to when I had said it about the Athletics and I wasn't really sure their record. The White Sox are losing 100 games. They are 27-78. They have a special chance to be all-time bad. 0-10 in their last 10. They've lost 11 in a row. Negative 202 run differential. They stink on ice in the middle of the summer. Somehow they find a way. So from where he sits, he's like, look, the only way I'm pitching in October is if somebody trades for me. But they should know before doing that I'm not going to be a mercenary for him. I'm not going to go out there and kill my arm again because that might be the extent to which I do need to start thinking about the innings load. I don't want to skip starts and then have to come back because he's in a good spot. That's what the Jon Heyman tweet says to me, which, again, I think is coming from the agent. That says, look, I don't think skipping a start to preserve my innings for October is the way to do this, even if I get traded. I would prefer to not go 10 days between starts because I'm on a good schedule. Pitching every 5th day is what's allowing me to feel good and strong and healthy. Totally fair if that's how the player feels. But in doing that, he's going to get up to 150, 160, maybe more innings. And if that happens, well, you're probably going to be tapped out by the time it gets to October. I don't want to overextend. And that's fair. First season off of Tommy John, that's like a full season. And in a starting role that you've never done at the big league level before. 54 innings is the most he pitched in the big leagues before this year, and that was a whole ass Tommy John surgery ago. So to think that there would be some desire to be a little bit careful makes a lot of sense. But he said, I need a contract extension if I'm going to, because then once I've got my money, and this might sound selfish to people, but I think it's completely fair. Once you've got that guarantee of long-term, and look, another Tommy John or whatever, or another big-time arm injury could take Garrett Crochet off this current path that he's on, which is basically Cy Young caliber, potentially. That might be in his future. Maybe not this year, but again, he's got the lowest FIP in the American League, so he's doing something right. What's your perspective on this, Cardinals fans? How do you feel about a guy saying, you can trade for me, but if you want me to pitch in the playoffs for you, we're going to have to talk extension. And this is a guy that's got years left on his team control as well. So it's not like an expiring contract or even a guy that's got just 1 year left. He's got 2 years left before he will be a free agent. 2025 and 2026. He'll be ARB eligible for both of those seasons. He's with CAA Sports. That's his agency. Very interesting stuff. And what I think is going to happen is he's not getting traded. Maybe he wasn't anyway, but if you're the White Sox, why wouldn't you trade him? A guy that's not been a starter. You say, let's do this and make him one. He's amazing. And people, see the shiny new toy and go, hey, this guy we could have for 2 more years after this one. Doing what he's doing. But is it going to last? Like, you have to kind of make that wager of whether you think this is going to be something that he can sustain. And it's not that I know anything about Garrett Crochet to say that he can't, but guys that do incredible things with baseballs in their hands sometimes miss years because of injury. Now, you maybe feel better because he just did that. Just had the Tommy John, so usually those things last 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 years. But who's to know? If you're Garrett Crochet, this is your shot. You best not mess it up. I think I understand him kind of looking out for number one a little bit, if this is how he feels or if it's his agent kind of pushing for it. I always kind of hesitate on that because at the end of the day, the player could choose to tell his agent to be the advocate for him and not the other way around. But I think it's a reasonable course of action. I really do. But what it means is teams are probably not going to meet the asking price, unless they want to extend him. Maybe it's like, okay, how long of an extension do you want? We'll buy out 2 years of ARB and maybe that's good for us to extend you. But will teams be ready to do that off of 1 year of a starter workload? I mean, we were praising Jordan Hicks earlier in the season for going from reliever to starter. And now he's kind of fizzled out as the season's gone along. Think about innings, right? It kind of stands to reason that down the stretch, a guy who is not used to that innings load is starting to maybe succumb to it a little bit. Jordan Hicks, 2022, threw 61 innings. Last year, 65 innings. This year, he's up to 98.2 innings. Again, his body had been conditioned his whole major league career to be a reliever for the most part. Had 8 starts before this season with the Giants. Now he's made 20 in 1 year. And maybe he's starting to falter a little bit. ERA up to 4.01, only 90 strikeouts in 98 innings, which for him, you feel like that's maybe a little low. A guy who historically, he threw so hard, you'd think he would strike a bunch of guys out. Doesn't throw 100 anymore. He's tamped that down to try to be durable. But at this point, the Giants have lost his last 5 starts, and maybe more. It only goes back 5 games on the game log I'm looking at. His most recent came against the Dodgers on the 23rd. That would have been Tuesday. He had 7 strikeouts in that game, but he also walked 5. Jordan Hicks, 3 2/3, gave up 4 runs, walked 5. Couple of wild pitches. So it seems like he's wearing down a little bit as the season goes. And I like Jordan Hicks. I'd root for him to be successful. But in his case, he got the 4 years and $44 million contract. So at that point, it's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's start me, whatever. He's got that security. If I'm Garrett Crochet, I understand thinking, hey, man, I'm pitching great this year, but that doesn't mean anything for me contractually if I grind it so hard that I get injured again before I get a chance to reap the benefits financially. And that's not a player being selfish. Anybody at their job would be thinking, yeah, how do I improve my standing? How do I get a better deal? How do I get a better salary? I don't blame a baseball player for doing the same thing just because we're talking millions instead of, a raise of 2% at your workplace as a common citizen. But hey, they're still trying to do the best they can for them, for their families. I would do the same thing. So I don't really have an issue with it. The problem is obviously you do have a chance to go win a World Series if you're traded to a good team. Wouldn't that be something you want to do? But I do think professionally you have to balance those desires as a guy he knows what it's like to miss a full season due to injury. It ain't fun. So trying to keep his health and say, no, I'm not going to pitch out of the bullpen for you either to try to preserve my innings. It's about my routine, and what's allowed me to be healthy and strong is to start. So that's what he wants to continue to do. But if you want him to do it into October and push that innings load, you're going to need to make sure that he's getting his money if you trade for him. So I think, honestly, if you're the White Sox, you're like, I wish he would have said that. Because, and look, he didn't say it, right? It was a tweet from John Heyman, but again, I think that's coming from the agency. But it's one of those deals where the White Sox probably had the prize of the free agent pitching market on their side there if they were willing to move him. And now teams are going to go, well, maybe we can get him for a little bit less because of this uncertainty. And the White Sox are probably going to say, no, he's still the same guy. We're not trading him without getting top dollar. So that may lead to him not being traded. Very interesting shake up to the market between that and Mason Miller. Two guys that have team control. They're great at their respective spots. May not have been traded anyway, but I think the chances for both of them decreased today with the news that came out on both of them. All right, one more topic to get to before we go down on the farm, which we will do because we want to give you the Tommy Edman update that you're craving. Dylan Cease, no-hitter today for the San Diego Padres, managed, of course, by Mike Shildt. And evidently, Mike Shildt had said he was going to take Dylan Cease out after 94 pitches. And that's Cease's second no-hitter, by the way. Pretty incredible to throw one, but to have two puts you in some rare company, I'm sure. So this is interesting because we had the conversation about Paul Skeens a couple of weeks ago when he was removed after 99 pitches and 7 innings. And I thought, all right, that's pretty clearly for Paul Skeens, rookie, got the innings thing to worry about. You want to keep him healthy, just like Garrett Crochet. We're talking about innings. It didn't bother me because I thought at 99 pitches, you're not going to throw 2 more innings without throwing 118, 120. And I just don't think that's a number that you need to be throwing necessarily as Paul Skeens to get through a no-hitter. He'll throw a no-hitter someday. There's almost no doubt about it that he will. But I just didn't think it had to be that game. And people got kind of mad about it and said, oh, you can at least let him go until he gives one up. But no, I was cool with the Pirates and what they did. Mike Shildt kind of conditioned the same way. I know you guys out there have your Ollie Marmol jokes keyed up. And then your jokes about, well, the Cardinals rotation would never put Ollie in that position anyway to have to make that kind of decision. Yeah, I know where your jokes are. I know where they're coming from. But honestly, Mike Shildt was ready to do the same thing, and Dylan Cease evidently talked him out of it. And he was able to go back out there. The first batter that he faced, I did end up watching the 9th inning live. First batter that Dylan Cease faced in the 9th inning fouled off what seemed to be 1,000,002 pitches against him. So it lasted kind of a while. But then the second batter, first pitch ground out to short, and it was like, we're back in business. I think he ended up with 114 pitches. Yeah, 71 strikes, 114 pitches for the no-hitter. 3 walks, 9 Ks for Dylan Cease. That helped the old fantasy team. Kind of think the Cardinals should have tried to push for him in the offseason. He wasn't traded until spring training. But I'll say the same thing as I said then. The Padres had a pitching prospect that anchored that deal. And at the time, I think he was just set to go into Double-A. But we have now seen Drew Thorpe at the big league level for 7 starts, and he's got actually pretty good numbers for the White Sox. 3.03 ERA in 38 innings. Only 24 Ks in that span, but he's been solid, obviously, with a 3 ERA in 7 starts. So he pitched so well in Double-A, had a 1.35 ERA, that he went directly to the big leagues, and he's holding his own in the numbers he's had so far for the White Sox. So because of that, it's hard to say, and like, remember, I said the Cardinals should have pushed to get him. However, I don't think they had the pieces to get him if Drew Thorpe was being offered up, a guy who's pitching well. He shut out the Royals for 6 innings on July 21st, his most recent start. Actually, he might have started today if he was on turn. Or no, that's what it is. White Sox did not play today, so he'll probably pitch tomorrow. But that's a guy that, like, the Cardinals don't have anybody that has emerged and has stepped into a rotation this year from their minors and is pitching well. They didn't have a Drew Thorpe level prospect as advanced as he was and maybe as high upside as he was. So that's relitigating some old stuff again, but I think that's part of why you don't get the chance to land a Dylan Cease, even if they had tried, which I think they also felt they had 5 starters and were paying them all, so that would have been complicated to trade for somebody. But now you're wishing maybe if they didn't try, you're wishing that maybe they did. Because who knows? Maybe they didn't try at all, and Gorman would have got it done. Or something like that. I don't think that's very likely. White Sox probably needed a starter for Dylan Cease. And, hey, they got one in Drew Thorpe. But anyway, good for Dylan Cease. He has a no-hitter today. And in so doing, knocked the Cardinals out of a playoff spot, pretty sure, is what happened there. I probably should have mentioned this before like an hour into the pod, but yes, I think as of this moment, the Cardinals are not in a wild card spot. Let me double check that. Yeah, the Padres are a half game up on the Cardinals now. They've won 5 in a row. The Mets, man, I didn't see them coming, but they have had multiple hot streaks recently to get where they are. Currently riding a 4-game winning streak as we record here. And they're the second wild card, only a half game behind the Braves, who have lost 5 in a row. So I guess that's the good news. If you're the Cardinals, there's really all 3 spots are up for grabs, not just the 2 that you thought. The Braves have come back down to earth for sure. But right now, they're still in that top wild card. Mets are behind them by a half a game. The Padres are behind the Mets by half a game because they trail them. The Padres actually have more wins than the Mets, but 2 more losses. So the Padres back of them by half a game. Cardinals back of the Padres by half a game. 4 teams, half a game separating each rung of the ladder, and it extends even further with the Diamondbacks a half a game behind the Cardinals and the Pirates a half a game behind the Diamondbacks. That is 6 teams for 3 spots. Yeah, I didn't realize the Braves were struggling that much. They've lost 5 straight. 6 teams essentially right now for 3 spots, and the Pittsburgh Pirates are one of those 6 as they've won 8 of 10. Craziness in the NL wildcard chase. The Nationals are probably out of it. They've lost 3 in a row, and they're 9 back. Cardinals obviously face them starting on Friday, so if the Nationals sweep the weekend, maybe they're still in the picture, but most likely the Nationals are done. The Giants are 6 below 500, but only 5.5 out of the wild card. Same with the Cubs. And then the Reds are sitting there 4 games under. It's a crazy, crazy picture. It really is. But the Padres, with that no-hitter on Thursday, are actually ahead of the Cardinals, and the Cardinals are below the line for the moment. Does that scare you into thinking, don't sell the farm to make this thing try to happen if it's just not meant to be? Or do you take the opposite approach and say, nope, I want to see this team make the playoffs and try to make a run of it. Therefore, they need to make some moves here at the deadline to try to better their position. Let me know those thoughts. Let's do Down on the Farm, and then we'll get out of here. It's time to go Down on the Farm. And Down on the Farm is presented, as always, by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs. Get yourself some eggs out there in Southwest Indiana. Hastings Layers Premium Farm Fresh Eggs. The next live stream I do will be with the Hastings Layers t-shirt on, by the way. I got to remember to do that. They just came in the mail this week. So that's what's going on there. We went to the zoo today, St. Louis Zoo, my family, my wife and I, and the young one. And he had a blast seeing all the animals. So I know that's not the same as, we didn't see any cows at the zoo, but just for anybody who cares, I had a Lemur Light beverage, adult beverage at the zoo. It was great. And a corn dog. It was awesome. Anyway, let's give you the Tommy Edman update you crave. He's in the lineup. He played. All's well, I guess. He was only DHing. But he went 2 for 4. So, all right, hopefully he's over the ankle. Hopefully the wrist isn't a problem. Hopefully they get him back and he can impact the lineup by going against some left-handed pitching, because that's been a sore spot for the Cardinals. Quinn Matthews didn't quite get through 5 innings, but that's not too uncommon. They're typically in 96 pitches, so it's not like they were super careful with his pitch count either. He just wasn't extremely efficient, but 4 1/3, 2 runs allowed. Pitched okay. Matt Swanson, though, is kind of turning into a nice little closer at the AA level. He's 25 years old. That's what makes it a little bit tricky, because when the Cardinals traded for him, he was in only high A. But that was the deal that was for Paul DeJong. And it was like, all right, you were just trying to get Paul DeJong on a contender last year. Expiring contract made sense. But hey, if Sponson wants to turn into a reliever that could be viable down the road, that'd be great. 2.89 ERA in AA. We'd have to see him in AAA still put up numbers like that to think it's possible. And he's pitching at 25 years old older than a lot of the folks at the AA level. So that's where you're a little skeptical. But hey, all good news from down there in Springfield today. 3-2 win for the Cardinals. Edmund hit 2 for 4. Quinn Matthews was fine. And Swanson, his 16th save. So that's what's going on down at AA. We'll give you the AAA update. 6-5, Memphis Redbirds beat the Clippers. Is that Columbus Clippers? That feels like a new name. But I guess it's not. I guess that's just the Redbirds didn't historically play against Columbus, and then when they moved from the Pacific Coast League to the whatever it's called, International League, maybe that's why. I just wasn't as familiar with. I was not familiar with their game, let's say. Solid stuff tonight from the Cardinals offensively. You may know this name, Jordan Walker. Ding dong. He went deep. Home run for Jordan Walker. 1 for 3, 2 RBIs, reached via walk as well. And I believe he might have gone back-to-back with Ivan Herrera because Herrera also homered. And I saw from their Memphis Redbirds Twitter account that that there was a back-to-back tonight for them. And so that happened in the third inning. Also happened in the third inning with one batter in between the back-to-back. Luken Baker hits his 27th of the season. Get that man to the big leagues. Trade him somewhere. I want to see him play in the big leagues. And if it's not going to happen in St. Louis. That is kind of the other thing about, I continue to say they will not trade Paul Goldschmidt this deadline to open up a spot for like Burleson at first and then maybe trade for an outfielder or something. They won't do it. I don't see it happening. But in a world where the Cardinals were not contending right now, that would be the perfect thing to do because then maybe you just throw Luken Baker in every day at first base that Burleson doesn't play and say, what is this guy? Let's find out once and for all. But I'm just not sure it's going to happen in St. Louis. And by the way, like he's only hitting 240 at AAA, so he's not probably a big average hitter, Luken Baker, but an 889, or pardon me, 898 OPS, if he could come up to the big leagues in OPS 760 because he hits a bunch of homers with a 220 batting average, I'm not saying that that's groundbreaking, but it would play. It would play for some teams. I just want to see the guy get a chance. That's all. Anyway, winners for the Redbirds, winners for the Cardinals, AA Cardinals. And a lot of guys with hits for Memphis tonight. Only Fermin didn't have one in their lineup. Everybody else did. So JC had a double. That's what's going on in the minors down on the farm. And I think that's what's going on tonight for B-Schaeff Daily. It's been over an hour. On a day where the Cardinals don't play, I find a way to talk for an hour. I'm sick of myself. You're probably sick of me too. Appreciate you guys as always. We will talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily.
Not so fast, my friend.
Okay, fine. As I was finishing recording the podcast, I look at my phone and see that Randy Arozarena has been traded to the Mariners. So crap. I thought I was done. And this will be a headline story. Obviously, Jeff Passan reporting the trade at 11:50 p.m., right about as I was finishing up. So this will be a headline story that we'll probably talk more about tomorrow. But Tampa Bay Rays getting outfielder Aiden Smith, right-hander Brody Hopkins, and a player to be named last. And then Passan obviously meant player to be named later, and he said that's what it should be called. Maybe it wasn't a typo. Maybe that's just a stand that he takes that I don't know about. Either way, let's look at a couple of these guys for you real quick. Reward you. Now we're in hour 2 of the podcast. I hate to do it, but this just happened as I was recording. I don't really check my phone as I'm going. That's why I miss a lot of stuff. That's why I didn't know for like 10 minutes last night on the live stream that my microphone was crap. Let's see here. Aiden Smith. Is that his name? Aiden Smith? Yeah, outfielder Aiden Smith is a youngster, just turned 20 a couple of days ago. He's got an 872 OPS this year in low A, so it doesn't seem like a huge get there. Arozarena is really struggling, though, by the way. It's not to say that Aiden Smith is not a good player. I don't know either of these guys. And Brody Hopkins has not played this year for the Rays in their minor league system. Drafted out of Winthrop last year, and they didn't give up a top 100 prospect for Randy Arozarena. Ha! Matthew Liberatore Still a Cardinal. Cardinals win the Arozarena trade. Take that, Tampa Bay. So they trade Arozarena. Are they going to want an outfielder? Like, okay, that's a seller's move for sure, but it's also they know that he's going to continue to rack up salary. He's not performing well. Well, he does have a 717 OPS now. That's better than I thought it was. 106 OPS plus. That doesn't seem like a lot that they got for him. And he's having ARB next year and ARB in 26. He's making $8 million this year. So they didn't want to pay him. They got a couple of young players, a couple prospects. They don't have to pay him. But that is a seller's move, man. Does that open him up to maybe trading Pete Fairbanks? That's where my mind goes. Certainly opens them up to trading Zach Eflin. If they're like, we're just dumping salary, basically. They're trading Arozarena for talent, but they don't want to pay him next year, right? They don't want to pay him $12 million next year and 16 the following year. They tried to trade him before this season. It's like they knew he was going to fall off a little bit. I don't know how much it changes things, but I do think it is substantial that they did make a seller's move. I just don't know if it's the type of move that like they can't possibly compete now. They're basically at 500. Arozarena was underperforming, was being paid more than they like to pay guys. They tried to trade him in the offseason. I don't think it's crazy, but it is notable. So let me know your thoughts on the Arozarena trade. He's a Mariner now. The reunion with the Cardinals is not going to happen. And Mariners did not really pay that much to get him, you know? That's interesting. I mean, obviously they're looking to buy now, if that's the move that they're making. They're in second place in the division. Houston has passed them up, but they're basically saying, nope, we don't care that we've lost 3 in a row and 8 of our last 10. I am Jerry Dipoto, and I will buy. And I will try to make something of this season. And if not, well, we've got Randy Arozarena for the next 2 years if we're willing to pay him. They'll probably flip him before that time anyway. All right, that's what we've got. We'll talk more about the Arozarena stuff as we learn more, as we know more. But it's interesting. Maybe the Rays could be a good partner for the Cardinals. I bet they'll turn Dylan Carlson into an all-star. All right, that really is the end of the podcast. Appreciate you guys. Talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.